so many different words for the same thing in all these ancient practices. Like we work a lot with breath, which we call pranayama in the Indian tradition, which prana is chi, is life force. Yama is extension, so extending life's capacity through breath.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and Sifu Taoist Master San Qing, and I've been looking forward to this conversation after this incredible guest accepted my invitation. I'm so grateful to have on the podcast today Brice from Esoterica Atlanta. How are you today, my dear friend?
I'm so excited to be here. I'm really excited. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Well, there are so many amazing things just from your own YouTube identity that intrigues me, because it goes down the path of a mystical realization, self-realization in that very discovery through esoterica. So let's go further into this. Give me a little bit, and the audience, a little abbreviated backstory as to how you got to this point.
Well, we were just kind of talking about that off camera. It's wild. I'm a huge student of the Bhagavad Gita. It's one of my favorites. My people on my channel have heard me reference it a lot. And there's a lot of big concepts in there about dharma and the difference between dharma and karma. And dharma is like your life, the truth of your life path, your purpose, like why you're here. Whereas karma is just cause and effects, action that happens along the way. And there's this great book by Ram Dass, the late Ram Dass, where he was referring to this idea of dharma and how we look back at our lives and things that we see that have happened in our lives that don't make sense at the time. They might be like total catastrophes to us, but when we turn around and look back, we see how it all, like a pearl necklace, how it all connected to get you to a certain point. And for me, I've always, as I'm sure a lot of our audience, especially if you're watching a show like this, you probably your whole life have questioned things. You're not quite comfortable with the reality of the matrix, or, growing up in the South, we have a lot of ghost stories. We have a lot of haunted things. So there was always this lore of the paranormal. So there's obviously something greater than just our material bodies. And my life was never like my friends' lives. Like I never had the 5-year plan. I mean, I went through the steps of education, but I always was hungry for more. Things didn't really satisfy me. And I ended up in my early 30s, after many years of practicing traditional yoga, I ended up in India. And I became one of the only female authorized teacher in the state of Georgia from KPJAYI. So to teach traditional yoga and traditional philosophy, and got accepted to a very prestigious school in India and spent many years going back and forth. And by the time I got authorized, I was teaching these packed out workshops and intensives where it was, I love philosophy, so I love teaching it. It became waitlist only. And then all of a sudden we had lockdown. So all of a sudden, this momentum was, as many people probably experience, like your career is starting to take off. You've got this momentum, and all of a sudden, you're locked down. Now, fortunately for me, I live in a state that wasn't super strict with lockdown, so I'm really fortunate about that. But what are you going to do? So I got on YouTube and I started just telling ghost stories and just doing like deep dives into dead people. And I'm not even at first never really even speaking about yoga, because we thought, what, it's going 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks. But then the months and months and months go by, and all of a sudden more and more of your life starts to creep out. So I started talking more about my experiences, especially when I started reading the missing books of the Bible and exploring those, because they are very similar to a lot of the Vedic texts. Interesting how that kind of is. We see in ancient cultures that a lot of these ideas, from the Egyptian mystery schools to India to more Druid, they're all very similar. So there must be some truth to that. And I ended up with my channel, as my channel grew, it was growing with two different types of people who like the deep dives, people who like the spirituality. But I started doing these like shadow work challenges, and I really, so as I was saying, looking back at your life, you can kind of see how things kind of fall into place. And thus here I am sitting here with you right now. If you had asked me 10 years ago if I'd ever be on YouTube, I would have laughed at you and said, no way. and here I am. So, God has a sense of humor, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. it kind of brings my attention to it myself. I wasn't, social sphere was not my calling. I really kind of was pulled into it by my teachers. Unfortunately, they're like, it's time. I'm like, no. So I mean, literally, I've been hanging out here for about a year, and oh my goodness, have I seen some things?
Yeah.
I've seen some things. I mean, biologically, consciously, I've been on this journey myself for about 32 years. So being aware of what the depth of this cultivation, you being deeply entrenched in this spiritual path from such ancient rituals like the ones that you have been exposed to, I put a lot of credence into the value of these ancient practices and these rituals, and the commitment that the seeker has to become the knower through this lineage. It's like the baton is moved down from generation to generation, and people have lost sight of this. And it's this new way of new order of realization where, you know, human history tells us spirituality, atheism, and religion are the cycles of poohooism, which go on all the time, right?
Yeah.
So now we're in this spiritual, you know, deny your connection with God. You are spirit. And I agree to a degree about this understanding, but there's also this level of, okay, where do people start? The whole purpose of the church, a place of ritual, is to start somewhere. And if that's meant for them, then I believe that's where they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Perhaps maybe you could enlighten us on just that notion.
Where do you start? You start where you are. You know, it's like I think one of the things, because you know, speaking of the church, I mean, I'm from the South, so we have super. I mean, there's two sides to the South, right? There's the super fundamentalists, but then there's like my family, who's like the eccentrics, that I call them, where they go to church on Sunday, but they're doing tarot cards and working with their voodoo root worker Sunday night. So there's like, church is more of a social call, you know, and so. But you believe in Jesus and you know the Bible and all that stuff. So I didn't grow up in like the fundamentalist sect. And I'm very grateful for that, because I do think there wasn't more of an openness, even though my parents would have never gone to India. That's not something they would have ever done. But I think for me, and why I say you start where you are is because what attracted me so much to this traditional practice is this idea where there was limitless possibilities, in the sense that, you know, when you grow up in a lot of religions, will say like, you know, if you do this, you're going to hell, or if you do that, you're going to be damned. But with the yoga scripture, when I say that, I'm not talking about just the Yoga Sutras. I'm talking about the Bhagavad Gita. I'm talking about the Vedic. It's thousands of years worth of, like, it's not just one book. There's multiple. But there's this prevailing understanding that, you know, what we see as sin, it's just, what it really means is just to miss the mark. You don't understand who you are, you know. And we have these two, and that's why I say you start where you are, because the secret is, the big mystery, the secret is everything you need, it's already in you. So the journey you go on is really going back to yourself. And it's a necessary journey, right? It's a necessary, because we have, as the Yoga Sutras say, we have Prakriti and Purusha, which is our Sanskrit words, which means nature and soul, basically, or Atman. And then we have Ishvara, which is a Sanskrit word for like the highest state of consciousness or God. And the, you know, Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras, his whole theory, he's kind of like a scientist. He's just exploring humans. Like, why do humans suffer? Why do we get sad? Why do we have this mourning? Like, why are we in these emotions? And his whole hypothesis is that we suffer because we don't understand who we are. We're in sin, because who we think we are is not actually who we are. I think I'm Brice. I think I'm this 41-year-old woman from Georgia. That's who I think I am. And in reality, that's who I am right now for this experience, but that's not who I am eternally. All right. And so that's what Patanjali kind of theorizes, that if we can learn as human beings on this journey of being in these bodies to appreciate the experience, to be totally and utterly human in our experience, because as one of my friends says, spirit is what we are, human is what we're doing right now. So we need to be in the body, in the nervous system, in the experience, but understanding that because the body is mortal, is not really real. It's illusion. It's Maya. It's illusion. So what is real? Well, what is real is the soul. And the soul is what they call Purusha, or the watcher, the one that's observing. And it's quite, in theory, it makes sense. But I remember the first time, long before I went to India, I was up in Philadelphia studying with my first teacher, and we'd done this huge conference on this. And the first time, like, hearing all this theory, the first time it actually hit me, I went home that night and cried all night. That was like my first ego death, because just actually accepting that fact, what happens when I die? Where do I go? Well, who is I? I is not Brice. That's just the experience. Oh my God, then what's left of me? If I'm not a white girl from Georgia, if I'm not whatever political party I am, if I'm not this religion, if I'm not the daughter of this person, or the wife to this person, or the, sister to this person, then who am I? And that's where the real work begins. And so, like, with these old ancient practices, like the traditional yoga is very, very different from the yoga you see in the West. It's very different. It's very intense. It's I've broken bones. I've been bruised, bloody noses. That's normal, because you're pushing your body. In your body, you have these pathways, these vayus of energy. We all know about the chakra system. We have these bandhas as well. We have this thing called kundalini. This is all part of the energetic body, part of the experience. And part of understanding your own attachment to self is to challenge that. And so you're brought into this environment, almost like this, like, voluntarily controlled demolition. We have the Yoga Karanta, which goes through, my teacher doesn't choreograph. It's given to us. I don't choreograph. I'm giving it the sequencing, the prescription, we call it, the poison, which is the postures, which go from prana to apana, upward energy, lower energy, to the neutralizing. And what happens in that work is, not only is your nervous system triggered just by the intensity of the physical work, but we hold all these attachments or thoughts. So yoga, chitta, vritti, nirodha, the vrittis, the thoughts, come into the body or the mind field, and these are attachments, and these show up as emotion. And so if anybody's watching that's ever gone on a long run, or have been in a yoga class, or been like doing something that triggers where all of a sudden you want to cry, or you have this moment of a flash moment of anger, it's usually the unpleasant emotions are the ones we notice, right? Not the pleasant ones, because the pleasant ones do come up too, but those tend to not be noticed as much. And that triggers our attachment. And so starting where you start, wherever you're born in the world, you're born where you are supposed to be for this moment, karmically, dharmically, whatever culture you're in, whatever family you were born in, that's where you're supposed to be. And the real journey comes through challenging yourself, so you learn who your real self is. And I equated a lot to Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, which a lot of people have read. And those who haven't read Paulo Coelho's book, The Alchemist, just briefly, it's about this little boy in Spain who's this, like, farmer kid. And he all of a sudden wakes up one day and he thinks his treasure is in Egypt. So the whole book is him crossing the Mediterranean, going through the Sahara Desert. He's having all these bumps along the way, these mishaps. He's learning things. And he finally gets to Egypt, and he's standing at the foot of the pyramids. And he realizes in that moment, we call it a prativa in Sanskrit, a flash of illumination. He realizes, my personal treasure isn't here. It's back at home in Spain. It was there the whole time. And he's having this, like, come to Jesus moment where he's just yelling at God, like, God, did you know this whole time that my personal treasure was actually in Spain, where I'm from? And God's like, yeah, of course I knew. And the kid's like, well, why did you send me all the way to Egypt? And God goes, well, aren't the pyramids beautiful? Isn't the journey part of it too? So wherever you are, wherever you're born in the world, the answer is always inside of you. So wherever you are is where you start. There's no magic pill. There's no, like, where you are is where you're supposed to be. And that's where your karma is taking you. That's where your dharma is taking you. And any mishap you have, any mistake you make is only going to benefit. I've made a ton of mistakes in this practice, but it's helped me actually in the long run, because that's how you learn. I think a lot of people think of spirituality as always being in this serene state of peace and light and love. And again, back to the Bhagavad Gita, that's a poem, a smaller book, part of a bigger book about a war, where this kid Arjuna is standing on this battlefield, and he's looking across at his family, his friends, his teachers, and he's got to go kill them. And he's having this, like, breakdown. He doesn't want to do it. And Krishna, who is the avatar of God in this story, who's really the most jovial of all the avatars. And he's like the happy-go-lucky, plays the flute, you know. And so it's funny that he's the avatar in this war. And Arjuna basically says to Krishna, I don't want to do this. And Krishna's like, tough shit. Buckle up, Buttercup. You're a warrior. Go be a warrior. And that's what I love about it. It's because that's that internal, like, we all have to face that hard stuff. That's part of the spirit. It's part of the self-discovery, is breaking through that friction, breaking through that. I know Ram Dass used to talk about, the late Ram Dass, that, you know, it wasn't, if his students hadn't suffered enough, he would tell them to go away and go suffer some more, because suffering is grace. You know, when you drop all the pretense, when all of a sudden the ego doesn't have a place to live and there's vulnerability, that is that moment where God enters. That is that moment where there's self-realization. And so that's what I love about the ancient teachings versus what we see sometimes in the West, where it's like, oh, whatever feels good, do it, or just be happy, that toxic positivity. I'm like, no, actually, it's dark. It's really dark. And wherever you are, you can find that friction and find that breaking. The more your heart breaks, the more the light can come in, that vulnerability.
Amen to that, my sister. Amen. No, I mean, I think you brought up a good point. Darkness in of itself. Within Taoism, we use our decipher for reality as the yin and yang.
Yeah.
Which has the very answers to all things, and you use that, and the goal for any seeker is to create, basically inquiry, to contemplation, to curiosity, to a belief system that is generated from hope, and then it is realized as a knowing from experiential moments, that you are not thinking, you are knowing. And that means that if you are thinking, you are not knowing. If you are feeling, you are knowing. And this comes back to the very understanding that you made a very good point from the physical flesh, the simplicity of that as a tuning fork. And that's why our chemical process for Taoism is so, I'm just going to be biased. I'm a fanboy of a Dane priest and 2 lineages of Taoism. Yes, this is true. The Taoist alchemy is second to none. Now, we can have the discussion of how that is in relation to the human timeline, and of course the incredible practices you teach, and they're around the world. But it's finding a teacher that shares this wisdom that will resonate with the seeker, the student, and have them be able to apply it and unify it. Because the simplicity of it would be this: if you're talking within a physics sort of model, we're talking metaphysics, we're talking philosophy, but let's just talk a little bit more this new language of physics, right? How we see things is quite simply, it's like the wave to matter, the particle realized with your attention, intention, forming from the cloth of perfection, the primordial mother as the Taoist seeker, you create dukkha, distortion. These are levels of distortion that you are creating. And I use the dukkha because a dear friend of mine, a Buddhist monk, Martin, he goes, I don't like all that energy stuff you're into, Sam. I couldn't care less about being able to, levitate and all the magic you get into and all that kind of stuff. I just want to sit here in silence without feeling that stuff and observe the dukkha. I'm like, hey, Martin, you do you, brother. You do you. But for me, that's the mystical, deeper nature of the occult, the esoteric realization of the magic, the superhuman that is actually supernormal. Yeah. And that comes from these practices. And that creates that curiosity that we need. And with that inquiry, we find that, oh my goodness, the potential is abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. And that is the true nature of reality from a Taoist seeker perspective. So when you get that and you distort that and you create this dukkha, you find that presents itself within the currency of this reality, which we call electromagnetism, this dualistic perception, which is really a game that we're playing this game to find the center point, the Vesika point. Within Taoism, we use the lens of everything in this reality as a bellows. everything is contracting and expanding at the same time. You're all things and nothing at the same time. And your mission, Ethan Hawke, if you choose to accept it, is to find that center point. And it lies within the ancient ritual of the breath. Between the breath in and the breath out is yin and yang. And between that, as you hold your breath, it reveals what we call absorbing of the riches. And it condenses this precious chi into what we form as the diamond of perfection, which is Wu Ji, primordial mother, which is unification. It is no longer electric or magnetic, it is whole. And with that, miracles take place. With that, there is a resonance. So you've observed this, created distortion. Evidence is energy. That energy has a vibration. The vibration has a frequency. A frequency, if met with a resonance, oh, yes, it will be yours. Oh, yes, it will.
Yeah.
And that's the mystery. That's the excitement for any seeker. But when we talk about the dark arts, I love this. Alchemy in of itself, if you water it down, just means Tao and dark arts, or God and dark arts, or universe and soul and source. So people go, oh my goodness, the dark arts. Well, it's actually, that's what we believe as Taoists, and this has been pretty soundly tested for thousands, tens of thousands of years. This stuff works, trust me. You know, when I teach someone some alchemical process to separate electric from magnetic, do whimsical things like shock you with electric sparks and put skewers through my arm and pull it out, and you can't see the entry or exit point, or witness a physical healing that happens like right now, not in a pause, this present moment, where you see flesh basically reset to the default setting of perfection. And that can come in the form of tumors, cuts, broken bones, whatever. Yeah, I've seen it. Maybe, unfortunately, I was spoiled. That was my grand tour of realization 30 years ago. It went from, and this is the other part that I really love about what you're saying, is I spent my childhood obsessed with the physical. So at the age of 10, I picked up this little book called Education of a Bodybuilder by Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I threw myself into literally bodybuilding and powerlifting.
And that's where you start, right? You start where you are. Yeah.
Right. And so I was a bodybuilder and powerlifter I still am, but like I before I discovered meditation, I spent, 9, almost 10 years competing, lifting stupid weights, hundreds of pounds. Like by the time I was 19, I was doing 800-pound deadlifts, 800-pound squats. And most people were mystified because there's no way you're doing that without helping yourself out with some little extra additive supplements. And what they couldn't believe is I was so deluded that I believed Arnold Schwarzenegger created his body with his mind. And that was pretty much how I entered into, meditation. I had no expectation whatsoever. And so being able to be tactile, to feel the resistance and the force and the power of this physical body, and then to realize this is a jump-off point, I absolutely appreciate how you've molded it through your own wisdom, teaching your own journey, and helping people understand that, yoga is not some foofy delusional state where you just sit there in the lotus position and, sing Kumbaya. You find the resistance, the center point, and then you unravel it so there is no disharmony, and there's complete fluidity within this tactile material that we call 3D realms, dimensions, whatever you want to call it.
I feel like I need to take notes because you've hit so many things. Because as I was saying in the beginning, there's so many different words for the same thing in all these ancient practices. Like we work a lot with breath, which we call pranayama, and the Indian tradition, which prana is chi, is life force. Yama is extension, so extending life's capacity through breath. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean the basic. I mean, it can mean extending your life, but what is it? It's really talking about the quality, because a lot of people hear this term in the West. They say hatha here. It's not hatha, it's hatha. Hatha, that's a Sanskrit word, the hatha yoga pradikapa. And Hatha is sun, moon, yin and yang, right? And we say that's the prana and the apana. So prana is upward rising energy. Apana is downward. Pranic is the sun. Apana is the moon. Men are pranic, women are aponic. We have a moon cycle. Men have a pranic. So there's these polarities, right? These opposites that are in the body as well. The two different nostrils, left being feminine, right being masculine, that weave through the spine, which is Sushumna, which is the tube of Kundalini. So when we're juggling the energy of the breath, of the inhale, which is pranic, or the exhale, which is aponic, we do a lot of breathing exercises where we do hold the breath, we lower it, and then we hold, which takes, you guys, I would definitely suggest getting a teacher for that. Like, don't try, some of this stuff is actually quite dangerous. Like, make sure you have somebody with you to help you with this. But, you know, we look at the bodybuilding stuff, for example, like, even with the body, I mean, when people come into what we call a Mysore room, which is a traditional room of practice, they typically come in with these limitations. They think they're limited with what they can do with their body, you know? And perhaps in that reality, there are limitations, and we build them up. And then eventually they're putting their leg behind their head and they're standing up and they've lost 100 pounds and they're learning how to use the breath. So if you go up into a handstand, just like you're talking about with the bodybuilding, when someone goes up into a handstand, they're learning to go up on the inhale, because that's what's helped giving them that consciousness. It's so much more. The breath is so much more than just oxygen. It's your life force. And that's what we're working with runners. You know, I reference runners a lot. I follow a lot of marathon runners because, listen, you can get healthy running 3 miles. People who run marathons, they're not doing it for health. They're doing it for something much deeper. And these marathon runners are coming to the same realization through marathon training that I did in India with my teacher, having my leg pulled behind my head. You know, they might have different words for it, but it's the same realization that you're able to push through those limitations. And, you know, the science can say, oh, yeah, it's just you training your body, blah, blah, blah. But there's more to it. There was a great guru, Neem Karoli Baba, they called him Maharaji, the late Ram Dass's late guru. And it's interesting you're talking about physics. I was just reading through some of my old stuff yesterday, where he said he was talking to his old physicist, because he was a professor at Harvard for a while before he became Ram Dass. And he was talking to one of his old professor friends who worked in physics. And they were talking about something, and he had seen Neem Karoli Baba, Maharaji, bilocate. And his friend was like, well, that's not possible, because physics says that's not possible. And Ram Dass goes, yeah, physics does say that that's not possible, but he did it anyway. And that he did it anyway. That when you start to realize that there are countless possibilities, and we talk about in the Yoga Sutras, the 3rd and 4th pada talk a lot about what we call the siddhis. Now, you study the 1st and 2nd pada for like the first 10 years before you even go into the 3rd pada. It's not secret. If you buy the Yoga Sutras, it's right there. They're not hiding it from you, because the siddhis, when used for bad, can be it's yoga powers, basically. It's the ability to levitate. It's the ability to have a heightened intuition. It's the ability to bilocate. It's the ability to make food appear out of nowhere, like kind of like what Jesus did on the Sermon on the Mount when he made things multiply. You know, and so it goes into this ability. So what is this? It's all these years of working in your actual body, being in your body. We all try to get out of the body, right? That's all. We see that in a lot of spirituality, people trying to get out. They stay in their upper chakras. They don't want to go down into the lower ones. They want to just stay in spirit. And to me, that's a form of disassociation. And I'm like, you're just creating more karma for your next life. Get in your body. And the trick is when we go seek down, it's like we have to, all the stories we see, not just of like in Christianity with Jesus, but of Tammuz, like all these different resurrection stories, Mithra. This is what this is telling you. You have to drop down into the hell, into the darkness, into the confusion in order to come right back up again. You have to. There's no other way but to drop down. And you know, and that darkness, it's interesting too. We talk about like the darkness, even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, who again is the jovial, happy-go-lucky, Christ-like, he tells Arjuna that you cannot fully worship me. You cannot fully worship the light unless you also acknowledge Shiva. And Shiva is the Lord of destruction, of chaos. The two cannot, we have to understand the darkness in order to fully turn our attention to the light. And in a personal, like there's a macro and a micro, right? In a personal, it's knowing your own darkness. It's facing those sides of you that, because that's where the biggest attachments lies, the jealousy, the anger, the abandonment issues, all that kind of stuff that's in those lower chakras that are deep in that pelvic floor. That's why there's a lot of focus on the pelvic floor to trigger that, to pull that up. We look at the body again as being, again, that springboard, that place of starting, and place you always go back to the foundation of this. Exercise. The root word of exorcism is exercise. You're exercising your own demons out of you, your darkness out of you. The Ramayana is another great, I love the Ramayana. It's Hanuman, who is the monkey god. He's kind of like the Archangel Michael. He's the god of war. And just very simply, part of the Ramayana, Ram, who is the incarnation of God, he finds the love of his life, Sita, and they get married and they're happy. Well, all of a sudden, this demon who has multiple heads called Ravana, he's like this horrible demon. He steals Sita and carries her away. And so Ram's all upset because he can't find Sita, his love. And so he hires Hanuman to go and find Sita. And Hanuman's also quite funny because he kind of forgets sometimes. Hanuman kind of forgets sometimes that he has all these incredible powers, that he remembers, then he forgets again. But he jumps from India all the way to Sri Lanka, where Ravana is. He jumps all the way and he finds Sita in the woods. He found her, but he knows he can't just kidnap Sita and take her back to Ram. He's got to battle Ravana. He's got to battle him because he knows if he connects her and takes her back, the whole system, it'll just keep happening over and over and over again. So he has to finish it once and for all. Well, the problem is Ravana is the beast that can't be slain. You cut one head off, another one grows back again. Now, I won't give it away, but he does end up getting Sita. He ends up defeating Ravana and gets Sita back to Ram. Well, this isn't a story about a monkey god. This isn't a story about a demon living in Sri Lanka. This is a story about you. Ram is God. Sita is your soul. Ravana is your ego. And Hanuman is your courage. The courage it takes to actually participate in your own self-discovery. The courage it takes to be Arjuna on the battlefield and face yourself and face the chaos within yourself. Face those clouds of confusion. A lot of people will say, man, it's so crazy that we were born on this planet with amnesia and we can't remember our past lives, or we can't remember. And part of me is like, that's kind of the fun of it. Because really you just learn that you're God dancing with God. That's what you are. But you can't, you got to go through that. That's kind of the fun of being here, is to forget that what would be the point of coming here with already just having that, not like knowing we already do have the knowledge, but not with those webs that, we got to dust the shelves off. And that's the fun of it. Aren't the pyramids beautiful? I mean, I can tell you so many stories of it. Definitely going to India is not a vacation at all. I mean, there's so many stories of, I've been in Indian hospital twice, there's so many bloody noses and feeling like you're about to break, but looking back, I wouldn't trade it for the world, because that's where you learn the most about yourself. You can't hide. When you can't hide and you have to face yourself, and you're working with a teacher who's literally seen it all. There's nothing you can say to that teacher that's going to shock them or impress them. My teacher actually just passed away, but he would say all the time, he would say, if you want to impress me, be a good person, be a kind person. Like, there's nothing you can do in this. No gymnastics move. He used to make fun of us all the time because we'd post Instagram pictures of ourselves and handstands. And he would say, have you seen Cirque du Soleil? I've seen it 8 times. They do it better. You're a yoga student. They do it better. Stop focusing. Use that as a tool. Use it as a tool. That's all it is. And so for me, what I do, because traditional yoga, it is brutal, and a lot of people are going to run from it. They're not going to want to. So what I've done a lot to try to help people is, okay, well, you don't want to do traditional yoga. What about bar classes? What about taking a Pilates class? What about going for a run? What about something that's within your realm of possibility that's going to create that friction, that's going to create those triggers for you to face yourself? I'm also a student of the Law of One, where they talk about the 2 different polarities, darkness and light, service to self, service to others. And we're here on this planet in this 3rd density to make choices of which path we're going to follow. And the reason why we have these 2 polarities, because it creates an opposing force. And with that opposing force, we get that friction. It's like we have a match, just a singular match has everything on it. It needs to light itself. It has everything on it needs to, but it can't. it can't light itself unless it's struck up against the matchbook. So that opposing force, that friction, is what causes the light to erupt. And that's us as well. And so we have to have, all these people, I think, out there, oh, suffering is so bad and there's so much this and so much that. Well, it's supposed to be. That's part of the journey. And your soul, the Bhagavad Gita, that with your Dharma, your soul picks certain things. Your soul picks obstacles for you. And it's all knowingness to help you, to push you along that journey. And I think people who don't have to suffer that much, they're the lucky ones, because their karma came up early. They didn't have to go through the crazy shit some of us have to go through in order to come to that conclusion, And that's the beauty of taking this ancient philosophy and molding it into today's world. It's thousands of years that these people on the planet Earth have been recognizing this philosophy for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So we just got to take it and put it in modern terms for people to realize it's all the same thing. It's all finding that within yourself that can strike that match, and that breath too. I mean, when I first started practicing yoga, I thought pranayama was stupid. I was like, this is what old people do. But now pranayama is like one of the most challenging things I do every day, because to use that breath to push the limitations of breath is and that's part of the crux of what we're doing, because that's connected to your consciousness. And you also get rid of, I think too, I don't know about Taoism, but I know like in yoga, you're really practicing as well for your own mortality. So you're already in the process of preparing for your own physical death. And so that when death does come, you can let go and just leave your body. Because that's all you're doing, is leaving your body. That's it. And we don't cling so hard. We don't cling so hard to the material world, which is just an illusion anyway, as far as theory.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's so many parallels to Eastern philosophy. And then Taoism fundamentally is know thyself. It's a Gnostic path. But on a deeper level, it's, a lot of people coin it to be similar to Buddhism, but it's fundamentally different, drastically different, actually. Because, if I was to speak to my Buddhist monk buddy, Martin, and really there's it's evident in what you would call the electromagnetism, right? So the human condition is nothing more than a transitory state. Permanency comes from the unification. Permanency comes from the ability to be imperium of the 50 trillion cells that have a 0.07 millivolt of electric potential. And when harnessed, you become the maestro of this reality. And furthermore, that's supernatural. You're like Oliver Twist. Can I have some more, sir? You want some more, boy? Oh, yes, I'll have another.
That's actually one of my favorite books. It's funny that you mentioned that, because that's one of my favorite, Oliver. That's one of my favorite books.
And so you become that Oliver Twist, but furthermore, how you access, as we talk about the breath itself and that condensing of it, which reveals the primordial mother, which is diamond, perfection. That condensing becomes transmuted into the physical body, which is part of the immortal path of a Taoist alchemist. So you transmute it to crystallize this as an immortal evidence within this realm. So you're what we call chi packing. So we saturate the physical body to a point where you have a level of sensory perception beyond any potential mind-blowing supernatural ability. So under that blanket, the sensory perception, I say that, and most people, oh, you're a Taoist priest. Oh, that's nice. Well, I've been teaching people internal alchemy, clairvoyance, mediumship, channeling, physical healing, manifestation. Hey, look, the New Age manifestation I find is quite problematic, because when you access that center point, the primordial mother, and evidence of unification within this electromagnetism, what happens is we reveal what we call Wu Wei, which is called effortless action, effortless effort. Everything becomes serendipitous, synchronistic. That means that you are that maestro. That chill you're getting up your spine right now is evidence of that. That charge is the evidence of our communion right now. Our unity is giving you that through the physical body. This is a barometer, a tuning fork to register said experience. And I think the delusional part is that when people talk about ascension, when you ascend, the energy doesn't dissipate and become non-tangible. It becomes extremely tangible. And it is what we call the substance. And you can do with it as you choose, as you master that. As you say, suitors or sitters,
Cities.
my friends,
Cities.
Yeah. I've only come across 3 people in my lifetime that can levitate. 2 were Indonesian masters of Kundalini in the jungles.
Yeah.
And 1 was one of my students. And they're like, well, how come you can't levitate, Jifu? I'm like, because I couldn't give a rat's ass about levitating. And furthermore, I get excited about seeing physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual healing right now. Right. And when I say right now, when I say present moment, when I say unification of the primordial mother, I'm no place, no person, no thing. We go from first person, third person, no person. Then you get down with the get down. Then you're able to see a transmutation that is instantaneous. And that comes with the compression of this said chi. And it turns into a laser beam, and it will saturate anything that you put your attention, intention to. Instant manifestation, magic, healing, affecting a place, person, or thing, energy, spirit, or God, matter, chi, or spirit, right here, right now. Bang, booyah. Let's do the Pepsi challenge. Get down with the get down. I'll take the Pepsi taste test with anybody. You got to show me. A lot of these people, they go da 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 da, and it's exciting. Yeah. But when they fall short of their potential, and a lot of people speak of all these abilities and all these types of things, and there was a one chap back in the 80s by the name of John Chang, who was the Magnus of Java, who was one of the very few people caught on video, admitting heat from his Lao gong points. You may have seen it, and he burnt paper, which was not and he showed evidence of telekinesis and telepathy and just general psychokinesis and high levels of dominance within the biofield. And this was all caught on a little camcord that someone was recording back in the 80s. Now, strangely enough, because my complete obsession with the Asian culture and the fact that I am a reincarnation of said evidence of immortal, I've done this thousands of times. My affinity with the culture and the understanding of it started way back when I was 4 years old, doing things like seeing through my hand, looking into the other wall on the other side, seeing what's in the room. All these types of things were just sensory perceptive developments, and they're only hindered by said belief system. And furthermore, the evidence is the somatic, kinesthetic, a realization of that charge. You have to feel it. It cannot be. This is very much fortifying the physical body and realizing that within a Taoist path, it's a path of immortalization within this realm. And so we nurture the physical flesh to maximize the duration of our journey within this spiritual consciousness, so that we can level up for the next level up. Whereas, and getting back to my buddy Martin, he looks at life like this. It's a pile of dirt covered in diamonds. I take up another diamond, look for some more dirt, man. There's got to be more misery somewhere. Give me some. Come on.
Suffering is grace. Suffering is,
right. And as a Taoist, I'll just say this. As a Taoist, that's not how we look at reality. Yeah. Reality for a Taoist, and this is where people are kind of like perplexed, is we look at reality as a pile of diamonds covered in dirt. You just dust off another one and pull it, and it's good to be me. And the more you get another serving, you want more. Guess what happens? You keep expanding. There's always a contraction expanding moment. This is the said evidence of this material, but it is your choice to decide. All of this is watered down to the simple choice or question of, is your glass half empty or full?
Yeah.
And that's it.
Well, I love how you talked about too, the seeing people levitate in the little Indonesia, right? Like in smaller. You see that a lot in India too, especially in like
Oh,
smaller
I
villages.
I have the alchemical process to teach you said evidence. I mean, I do crazy stuff. I heal flesh. I
Yeah,
heal people at a level that is beyond, you know,
right.
comprehension. And I've seen it for 30 years. I mean, the
Yeah,
first time I ever saw a physical healing, this is the part where you said some people get to their karma a lot quicker. Like literally at the age of 19, I went from never heard of meditation, big meathead bodybuilder, thinking that I was just moving things. But actually, the highest point of contraction is when you hold that breath, go for the lift from concentric to eccentric, and boom, that's where the power comes from, the condensing of this said energy. And you know, that's how I did stupid things within bodybuilding. But the first time I experienced meditation, that was back in the days when there was no such thing. You know, it's like we don't have the interweb. I have to tell my kids, hey, look, we have this thing. It's called a telephone, a rotary phone. You ring on it, and they're like, "Whoa, really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you know, let me see. I had this thing. It's a really foreign to you. It was called a newspaper. And in the newspaper, there was classifieds. And in the classifieds, I found this person offering a free meditation class. I was like, I'm going to roll up there. A voice in my head said, you need to find meditation. I'm like, everyone has it, right?
yeah,
It's that intuitive state. Now, at that time, I had no idea that that was a deeper nature of my teachers, my knowing, and the information was coming in at a rapid rate. So at that point, the hubcaps were coming off the wheels. Like
yeah,
at 800-pound deadlift, 800-pound squat, my body was going, please give me mercy. So I was like, oh, yeah, let me go check out this thing. And so in those days, the only people that meditated were Hare Krishnas and weird yogi people. And it just was so Eastern philosophy that it was too wacky for people. You
yeah,
know what I mean? It's like, you know, we just got out of like, you know, a yellow submarine and, you know, Beatles taking the psychonaut journey of realization. And people were still trying to comprehend the 60s and 70s more so the merging of 60s into 70s. So, you know, by the time I got around to it in the 80s, it was still very foreign. I mean, it was
yeah,
like you're some foul for a spout, carrot eating whack job that doesn't, you know, we're not gonna no. So I turn up to this meditation class in the middle of a ghetto in some little sort of like rec center, youth center in a ghetto. So I'm a big burly guy. I was over 300 pounds at the time. I drive up there, I park my car, I'm hearing guns go off, dogs barking, ambulances, just noise. And I'm like, I'm probably going to die tonight. This is great. This is awesome. So I get out of my car. I walk up the stairs into this rec center, and there's half a dozen misfits like myself seated on the ground in this weird position that, you know, it's called the lotus position, I guess. And this little 4 foot, literally 4 foot, like grandmaster. And she's standing there. She goes, welcome, come in. And I go to sit down because I'm like, you know, when in Rome, let's
yeah.
attempt to do this. And I look like an overgrown ape trying to scratch my ass. It didn't happen. My back was killing me. I'm sitting here. I'm listening to all this shit in the background. I'm like, you know what? It's going to end badly for me tonight. I guess I made a mistake. As all this nonsense is going on, I can't focus. In my mind, from everything I learned from meditation, it was stillness.
Yeah.
You had to be still. And, you know, through further discovery, this is absolute nonsense when you master the energy.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sitting there, my back's aching, all this stuff is going on in the background, and she's standing there, and I'm sitting down, she's standing there, and she still comes up to my nose. All right, I'm like, wow, okay. And I'm thinking, what exactly is this woman going to do for me? I was very ignorant, you know. It's about to slap up the back of the head, get real. And, you know, she goes, all I want you to do is listen to my voice. And I'm like, as she said that, I'm like, you're so full of shit. This is going to be painful. I'm in pain right now. And then her next sentence was, and then everything will fall away. And after she said that, I'm sitting there, and it for 15 minutes was like this. And I'm looking around, my eyes are open, and it's freaking silent. There is no sound. There is nothing. It just disappeared. And I'm like, holy shit, this is the most powerful thing I've ever put my hands on. This is the most powerful thing I've ever experienced. Forget this bodybuilding stuff. I want to source the power of that ability. And it literally lasted for 15 minutes until it slightly faded out. And I'm like, that's it. I'm bitten by the bug. And so the next day, this is my cheating hack that you probably, you refer to as some people suffer for a short period of time. I went from that to finding a channeling class with some guy who had spent 60 years in said position of teaching people light body and channeling your higher source and all this kind of stuff. I roll in there and there's 20 people in the class and they're like, what the hell is this Neanderthal doing in here? Like, he doesn't fit the profile. What is he doing here? Whoa, look around the room. This is a bodybuilder. This is something we get him out of here. Anyway, the teacher's kind of looking at me like, this should be interesting. So I get down and literally in 5 seconds channel my teacher, to this day, Latsu. And when you channel at a visceral level, and I'm an OG, so when I'm channeling the embodied spirit of my teacher, I'll take my hand to a flame and hold it there and then pull it away after a minute or two when there's no damage to the flesh, because this is not of this world. You understand the ancient teachings. This is the very core of how Taoism was created over time. It's from channeling. It's direct source. You embody that within the physical flesh, then set evidence. So, I've got a lot of friends that have traveled the world training with all-time gurus, and there's all different ways, but under the guise of when you get there, the amount of heat that was generated, and I generate whenever I channel my teacher. Now, I'm always in commune with him, and 99% of what I say is not from my knowing. I'm as dumb as rocks. Information just comes out. But when that happened, everyone in the class got a stick out with a marshmallow and started cooking it. And this teacher literally was, what the fuck? He was so pissed. I'm like, hey, what is happening? I'm experiencing this whole physical body engulfment of this absolute insane heat, and it's going through my whole body. It's a whole charge, and I'm getting this information, and I'm hearing clearly this voice of this guy, and I had no control over it. It's coming out of my mouth, and I'm speaking all this stuff, and he's like, "You son of a bitch," and I'm like, what's going on? It's like, I can't believe it. I mean, he should have been evolved enough to go, well, this is always going to happen. You're going to always experience students like this that awaken instantaneously. Yeah. And furthermore, it went from that to the next day. I did a distance healing on someone, having trained in it for 30 seconds. And her ankle went from a watermelon down to shrink, disappeared in seconds. And so I was using it over the phone because I got back from training with this guy who had disdain for me at this point. He's like, I don't even know what to say about you, because I am jealous. So clearly you're still working on yourself, bro. It's all right.
Yeah.
I did the distance healing class, and my friend called me up and said, look, I just can't make it today, because I wanted to see her. And the rotary phone, and I just finished the day, and she's like, look, I busted my ankle. It's the size of a watermelon. It kills to walk. I can't even stand on it. So I'm just gonna hang out, elevate my foot. I'll catch up with you in a week or two. And I'm like, okay, well, whoa, hang on one sec. I did this thing today. It's called distant healing. And she goes, yeah, what is that? Look, don't get into the weeds of this thing. Let me follow the instruction. And in the end, I'm going to do this thing. They call it this incantation thing. And when I do the incantation, let's see what happens. And she's like, listen, I don't know what you're doing, but like you're wasting my time. I'm in pain. You're on the phone. It's stupid. We're not doing anything. I'm like, just give me a chance. So I go through, I read the whole thing, and then I finish off with the incantation was so like ridiculously infantile. Heal, 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 heal. And next minute I go, what the fuck? And I'm like, what? Whatever fucking sorcery you are doing, you better tell me what it is right now. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she goes, my ankle shrunk before my very eyes and disappeared.
Yeah.
I'm standing on it right now. This is the kind of stuff that we know. And I'm like, you cannot make this stuff up.
Well, it's part of that vibration, right? Like the speaking as well. That's part of Ayurveda. Is the three elements of Ayurveda are breath, food, and vibration. So speaking. And I believe, we do intense chanting, Sanskrit chanting in India, and we'll do hours of it with our Lakshmsha, our teacher, our chanting teacher. And there's this one particular Ganesh chant. Everybody knows who Ganesh is. That's the elephant god. And it's a very long one. And it never fails. Every single year I'm there. Every single day we get to this.
You got your own relationship with Ganesh, right? Because the second you mention Ganesh, he literally engulfed your whole aura and
Possibly,
was very present.
I have. Let me show you guys. I've got, this was given to me by a friend of mine who, blessed by a Brahmin, she just gave it to me, a glass little Ganesh. I got another little Ganesh here from one of my little awesome Indian viewers. But yeah, I love Ganesh and I love Hanuman. But yeah, Ganesh, there's one particular chant.
The splintering out into it seemed like affinity versions of himself.
Oh yeah, he's the guy. He brings obstacles, but he also removes them as well. And he's got an elephant head. His body is the body of a boy.
Oh yeah, it's like he's very present.
He's very joyous too, kind of like Krishna. Well, there's one particular chant that we do. It never fails. I start to sweat. I have a panic feeling like I want to run, but I know I'm trained enough to know that that's the most important chant I do because of the reaction that it's the visceral reaction it's having within my physical body, that something is moving, something is, and a lot of what people talk about, and I get down here in the South, I get threats from Christians a lot. Like I've been told that I should be sent to Gitmo and executed for teaching yoga, all sorts of crazy stuff. But we know that a lot of these things is actually what Yeshua, or you say Jesus, Yeshua was actually teaching were these things. The original definition for the word savior was one who saves himself. And we hear the story of the seven demons that were exorcised. Well, that's the seven chakras. That's the Reiki. That's what Reiki is. That's what my boyfriend has a crazy story with his guru who passed away before I even made it to India. And this guru did not speak much English at all, but my boyfriend had a really bad hip. My boyfriend's 11 years older than me, so I was still a young child when he was in his early 20s in India. He always had this bad hip. He was a skateboarder. In between his first and second trip, he had really damaged his hip. His hip was really bad. And he got back to India and he went to go see Guruji, and Guruji was like, "Oh, what's wrong?" And before my boyfriend could even say anything, he wasn't my boyfriend then, but at that time, and he was like, "Oh, injury," and he goes, fixing. And my boyfriend said whenever he would say fixing, you were in for it. Like he was going to fix it, and it was going to be an experience. And he said, so for all these days, he would come into the room in Lakshmipuram, and Guruji would like push and pull him while he was in his practice and just kind of make noises and grunt. And he said one day the stars must have been aligned. And he was a small man, like 5 feet tall. My boyfriend was in a posture called Upavishta Konasana, where your legs are just kind of in a straddle stretch and you're bending forward. And he said his teacher, his guru, climbed on his back and he whispered into his ear and he said, "Inhale, exhale, going." And when he said going, he slammed his chest down to the mat. And my boyfriend said there was a huge sound that came out of his hip, and everybody kind of turned around and looked. And my boyfriend sat back up and Guruji rolled off and started laughing. And he was like, "Tomorrow you come," because he knew that he was going to be very sore the next day. "Tomorrow you come tomorrow." And so my boyfriend woke up the next day and he said he was so much pain. He got back down to the practice room. He did one sun salutation and Guruji sent him back to rest. My boyfriend, this was when he was probably 22, 23 years old. He's now 52. He has never had an issue with that hip since. The healing that happened, there was a shaman. It's like shamanism, right? I think a lot of people in the Western world are familiar with the term shaman. These abilities to do things, to manipulate in a good way, and correct. And correcting is happening. Healing is happening. And anybody can do that. It's just we forget that we can do that. And I love that story of your meditation too, the first time you discover meditation, because it just goes to show you don't have to be anywhere special. You can be in the ghetto in a rec department, and
I mean, obtaining that Imperium is wild. And then furthermore, I mean, that distant healing went to me going to see her because I said, you're full of shit. It wasn't going to happen. So I turn up to her house. She runs to me, gives me a hug. And I'm like, okay, what kind of bullshit are you pulling on me? Because you're standing here and you claim you had a swollen ankle. And I was still not buying it. Yeah. Then in those days, we have these things called Polaroids. And she took photos of everything. So she took a photo of her ankle beforehand. And she goes, take a look at this. I go, what the
Yeah.
It's gone. And I'm like, I mean, that just seems unfathomable in my mind. And then she was living with her mother at the time. So her mother was some big bloated alcoholic chain smoker. And she's sitting in the background and I'm doing this with her puffing away like a freaking chimney. And I go, I just can't comprehend that. I mean, that's just insane. But then again, I'm also listening to spirits now.
Yeah.
It's like, hang on. So I went from not meditating to meditating. Now I have this voice that I can hear audibly that is giving me instruction, and I feel him in my body. And I'm like, okay. Then the mother's puffing away, and she's like, I always knew you were a healer. I'm like, what the hell is this shit? And I'm like, what? And so I had this, my own conflict inside was, I didn't want to share with anyone that I'm hearing these very clear, audible voices that are giving me instruction and having conversation with me, because I'm not going to be admitted in the psychic ward or psycho ward before the week is out. So I'm going through my own conflicts. And she's like, yeah, I got a problem with my foot. You're going to come back tomorrow and heal it. I'm like, sure. Why not? At this point, I said, why not? I'm 3 days into insanity. Why not make it number 4?
This is fun. So, just keep going with it.
Yeah. So I roll up to her house, and she's bloated, and everyone placates her because she's got tons of money. So she's sitting there puffing away. Her foot was more than just sore. She couldn't see herself, so she sits up in this armchair with a bloated stomach, puffing away. She's got a maid. People do everything for her. Then she's got her feet on a stool. So probably hasn't seen her feet in decades. She was in her 70s, and she swore by this, bottle of vodka and cigarettes. Hey, look, it's a belief system. She goes, I don't believe in doctors. You know that. I'm like, yeah, I do. And so I peel her sock off. I get down there and peel her sock off and go, it's a gangrenous foot.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm like, holy shit, let's get this woman to the emergency room, the hospital. And Latsu's like, no, we're going to heal her. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? No, we're going to heal her. You're going to witness the healing right now. I'm like, hey, at this point, who cares? And she's like, how's it going down there? I'm like, I don't know. We're just taking a look here. Yeah, you do your thing. You did it on my daughter. You do it. And I'm like, yeah.
Pressure's on.
And in 40 minutes, I kid you not, Brice, in 40 minutes, it went from gangrenous to pink in flesh color in 40 minutes.
I believe it. It's what's that Ram Dass story, right? Like, is that possible? No, but you did it anyway.
Well, it's not possible within the mindset and the mind prison of this reality. Right. But I think the biggest thing for me was I had zero expectation. I came from bodybuilding. I claimed to myself in my mind I was an atheist, all this other bullshit. And then it went from going from an atheist that really, I don't really believe in anything. I was believing in something. That's how I was achieving all these goals within bodybuilding and powerlifting. And then furthermore, not knowing anything about meditation, well, that was a fallacy too. That was a delusion. Yeah. And then you go deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And I had zero expectations. So if I read something off a menu and someone tells me, and that's really what that was, it was an instruction of how to do it. It wasn't like I was primed. It's like, right, this is what you're going to do. And I had zero expectation. I expected it to work. Why wouldn't it? This is what I'm being trained in. At this point, I'm listening to a guy in my head. This has to be real. right? So I think as I really review it, it's always childlike in your nature. Take everything at face value.
Yeah.
So when you do that, all of a sudden things become realized. But the substance, it was like once that happened, I was like, holy shit. Then I went into a downhill spiral where what we call within my sphere as a breaking, most people would call in a new age language dark night of the soul or something of that nature.
Yeah.
I had 5 days after that, literally after that. This is where you said the karma all condenses and you get out of the way and move right along. And then sometimes it happens for people. I was one of those people. I had every thought, every feeling, every emotion for 5 days straight.
Yeah.
And when I say that, I mean by the third day, I was distracting myself by attempting to go to a movie. And this is what would happen. I go into the theater and all this shit is going on. It's just beyond comprehension. You're a cooker that's going to explode. It just cannot contain anymore in the physical body. It's just happening everywhere. And something as benign as witnessing a naked woman walking across the screen, I viscerally threw up on the person in front of me. And I threw up and I was convulsing. And my whole body was riveted by this. And I'm like, dude, really? I mean, it just doesn't. And at that point, it was like, suicide sounds good. I think this would be a good idea.
I know many people that this will, myself included, where you'll have those thoughts because there's so much that just.
Well, yeah. I mean, what happened was I held on because that was just the nature of who I am. After 5 days of that insanity, I finally got hold of my teacher and I told him, and he's like, oh, fabulous. That's amazing. I'm like, oh, you son of a bitch. It's like, he was like, I can't, and so I went straight into psychic stuff. And this guy was teaching me reading auras, basically. And he expected me to have a progression, but then again, he didn't, because I went from channeling to distant healing to healing in person to a dark night of the soul. And the next minute he's teaching me clairvoyance.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. He goes, okay, so I'm giving you the fundamentals, right? Well, here's the thing. He gave me the fundamentals and he goes, do a reading on me. I'm like, well, okay. Hey, look, I got nothing to do. Okay. So he's like, go on. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this entity is telling me that you are using your programming and training to siphon energy from all your students, and you have been for years. You and your girlfriend are doing this very thing, and you are in a contract with something ominous that tells me that if you do not stop what you're doing, they're going to take your life. And he goes, what the? Whoa, 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 whoa. He grabs me and goes, let's go into the other room. And I'm like, was I right? He's like, holy shit.
You basically call it his vampire. Yeah, no.
Right. I didn't even, like, in the moment, I wasn't even listening to what was coming out. I was just giving him the information. I was like, was I correct? And he's like, shh, shh. You cannot tell anyone about this. And I'm like, what? Was I right? Because I didn't really fathom what it really meant.
Right.
I was like, it just came out. And he's like, holy shit, you can see that? I'm like, listen, all I did what you told me to do. You taught me how to do this stuff, and I'm just doing it. Is this information correct? I was more excited about, I actually got this a first go. This is amazing. This stuff is real. And he's like, shh, shh. Please. And I'm like, listen, all I can tell you is this energy is telling me if you don't stop this, it's going to kill you. And he's like, whoa, I can't stop. I'm like, well, I don't know. It just says you're going to die. And he's like, I can't stop it. What? I said, what's the big deal? Your life is not worth whatever this is. He goes, listen, this has given me all these powers to do remote viewing and all this other crazy astro stuff. And I'm going to consider that. I'm like, okay. And I didn't really fathom that, his girlfriend and him were actually ciphering all the energy from every student, and that was the contract that he had with this entity. So every person that would come into his training was being siphoned.
Yeah.
And that, to me, I got to a point where 6 months later, I held him in my arms because he was diagnosed with brain cancer and he died. That was it. That was the slam dunk. You know what I mean?
What happens in the spiritual world? People, you got, for people out there, if something doesn't feel right with a teacher, trust those instincts. That's part of that inner knowing, because that, that people will do that. And that's, I mean, that's energy vampirism. And yeah, but that's that, we call it prativa too, which is a flash of illumination when you get like hit with that prativa. And it's like you said something earlier, and what you're saying now just reminded me of something Ram Dass used to say. You can know knowledge, but you have to be wise. Like, knowledge, you learn knowledge, but being wise is a part of your being, and having that gnosis, that versus the EDO. And it's yeah, these siddhis, these abilities to transmute through the limited. We talk about the brain, the thoughts, the limitations. Like you said, you had no expectations, and even the Bible, it says, be like children. Have that innocence of a child, where you believe in Santa Claus, you believe in the tooth fairy.
I've got 6 kids, and even my 12-year-old still believes in Santa Claus because I haven't diminished his ability. But also, out of those 6 kids, 5 of them I've taught remote viewing, I've taught telekinesis, telepathy, and they're continually building on the evidence of their ability, energy healing, and they can do it. Yeah. And that's the part where it blows their mind, because they're not bound by the limitation of someone else's construct.
And academics that, that kind of, academics are great, but they can also limit us to what is reality, what is unreal, and what is real, when really there is no such thing as unreal. It's all perceptions of reality. And telekinesis, that I struggle. I had a little bit of that when I was a child. And I think that's probably the first thing most people notice, is that the energy to move something just by your presence, just by you focusing that energy. And I think it scares people a lot. And we talk about the second sutra of the first pada of the Yoga Sutras is Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which is yoga chitta, mind, like the literal brain. Vritti is thoughts. Nirodha is nothingness. And basically what Patanjali is saying, your thoughts, that limitation is what's stopping you from knowing your soul. And so it is that having that innocence. Children, it's not hard for them to believe in Santa Claus. Of course there's the man that flies around the world on a sled, and he comes down your chimney of every child in the world and leaves. Of course he does. Like, no brainer. Of course he does. Of course there's an Easter bunny. Of course a bunny hops around and leaves you candy. Like, and
I think the biggest thing is being able to tap into the spirit energy.
Yeah.
I've one of the big trainings for any Taoist is what we call psychometry, or radio, or radiesthesia. Furthermore, how do you pronounce it? Sensesthesia. The sensibility to define things at a subatomic level. Yeah. And amplify them so that everything. So we call this body dowsing. So you can identify power centers, ley lines, vortices instantaneously. Like you have 17 in your spot right now. And I think the thing that blows people's minds when I tell people that, because I have their eyes open, they go, "What the hell are you talking about?" I'll be like, "Oh yeah, it's upstairs at the foot of your bed," and they'll be like, "Bullshit." I'm like, eyes open, go upstairs, test it. They come down and say, "What the how did you know?" And then, like, their sensitivity becomes more refined just with the frequency. And I think, if I have this habit, and you can tell me to stop, but I have this habit of what my students call aura dipping. So I see some things that potentially could be obstacles. I always want to help. It's always a helping hand to help people more realized. But I mean, within a Taoist understanding of the energetic potential, your sensitivity can be dramatically increased through said metal energy and lung channel. Your sensitivity will be amplified. I'm just a note, just an observation, not something that
this is fascinating to me. I love this stuff. This is so fascinating.
Well, this is how I do psychic. When I teach people psychic readings, I call them psychic black op readings, because people get kind of blown away that in 3 seconds of you meeting someone, you can give them their physical, mental, emotional, spiritual state. And they're like, how the fuck do you know? How do you do that? It's just a training. All this stuff is ladies and gentlemen, be very clear. No one is lesser or greater than anyone else. You just need to have a method to your madness. You must obtain a method of cultivation. Yeah. And once you do that, 100%. I always give people that. So I'm out here in Nevada or Las Vegas. So sometimes I take my kids down to the strip and we play street magic. And we love to go up to people. And some of the first thing I like telling people, some of the simplistic understanding of the polar opposite in the electromagnetism of conscious and unconscious process. If people don't understand an entry level of something like hypnosis, they're crazy. They need to understand every level of ascension. And so when you accelerate, something as simple as entry level of that is to show someone they access something instantaneously. So when we go down and we play street magic, we'll do aura readings, we'll give people bliss charges and transmissions and the type of things where you want to see something really crazy, you can do it right now, not something that has to be, oh, we're going to work up to it. Because a lot of people with the suggestion of a hypnotic state, which is really just a different level of awareness, you have to build it up during said suggestion, contemplation, command. That's all sort of old age nonsense. I just acquire a frequency. Yeah. So before I even enter their biosphere, my frequency is met. So I can walk up to someone and they say that, only some people can get into a state of somnambulistic deep trance, which is really a state of complete epsilon, which is a brain wave that goes deeper than delta, but you are accessing the impossible consciously. And so, when you come up to someone and you're already admitting that frequency, which everything is frequential, this whole thing is frequential. That's it. That's frequency. Yeah. People have really strange effects. Like if I walk up to someone and I go, hey, would you like to feel bliss? And they're like, yeah, okay. And then their friend gets out the camera and they're videotaping and they get ready. And before I finish bliss, it's like, good night. And they're asleep standing up. And their friend's like, oh my goodness, what happened? And then it's like, well, what would you like to see as a form of miracle? I mean, why don't we start with something as simplistic as erasing their name? I'm Justin Bieber. Hey, why don't we take their wallet and keys and wave it in front of them? You're videotaping this whole thing. This is all for entertainment. And they're like, okay. And they're like, this is scary. And in 3 seconds, you have that person awake. And they're like, okay, so when are we starting? And their friend's like, holy shit. Well, when are we starting? Yeah. When are we starting? And then they take a second and then they look and they go, oh, it's Justin Bieber. Can I get a photo? And like the friend at this point is floored. They're looking at you going, what? By the way, before we get a photo, what is your name? And the friend is videotaping this thing going, your name is Angie. And they're just floored. And in the same breath, all of that is wiped. And then they're awake again. And they're like, okay, so when are we starting? And their friend's like, holy shit, this can't be real. And then within one moment of a brief or flighting passing of my hand, all the memory comes back in. Now, this is just an ability. Anyone could do this. Anyone can merge into this. Anyone has the ability to focus. But it's an incredible sense of knowing when you can access this stuff instantaneously. This is sort of like the infantile level of where you and I are talking about the level of ascension. When I channel my teacher, Latsu, that's the highest point of ascension. My dialogue with my teacher is my bonding with the monologue with the primordial mother, the Tao. This is what is said evidence. And it comes in the form of that evidence in this material realm. The ability to create manifestation, magic, healing. These are evidence-based experiences. Because other than that, it's just talking head stuff. Yeah. But, the kids, so when you do psychic readings, I just read the energy. You have what you call chakras. We call them dantians. and there's 9 dantians between with the human body and the connection of the earth and universe. So our dantians are basically the energy elixir, the field of energy, what we call the cinnabar. And what happens is when I read them, I always start at the bottom because I'll be like, okay, magic man, read my aura for me. Go on. You can do it. Thinking that they were going to get something stupid. They're already buzzed. All these people are having parties. It's Vegas. It's like, yeah, read my energy. I want to know. And I start at the bottom because I'll start with Earth, which you would call a transpersonal point. That's Dantian 1. And then Dantian 2 would be the root chakra, which gives you very clear evidence of how protected, how reserved, how many boundaries that person really has, and how far they really want to see into themselves. And in most cases, it's not just an energetic thing. They're puckering up. They don't want to let go. They don't want to release. And then I'll just move right into the sexual energy, and they'll be like, whoa, 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 whoa. You could see this shit? Hey, look, I could give you a few techniques if you want to up your game. And they're like, we're good. We're solid. And in most cases, that'll transmute excess to deficiency. And you see the eco center of the 5 elements that reside within the physical body, which is fire, water, metal, metal. Sorry, what did I say? Air. Fire, water, metal, air, wind, and also earth.
Yeah.
And so these are all reside within, and you understand these teachings, you teach them yourself. They're within the organs. So they're all stored within that. You want the excess to deficiency, but it just blows people away because I read it off like a menu. I'm not looking to get your approval that I'm the next coming of Jesus Christ. I couldn't care less. And that again comes back to the face value, why the information comes in so easily. But I see it with my eyes open. And that's something where a lot of people, it's just a mastered skill. It happens. It can. I've taught hundreds of people how to do this. You get into this developed skill. It's not just for one person, but your commitment to it is the evidence.
Yeah.
And a lot of people come from a construct and a mindset. They want it, but then they realize that as you unravel the onion, they're not so happy with what they're finding. And they tend to get a little detoured, or in some cases, they don't want to unravel the onion. I was just kidding. And that's okay. But in most cases, when people just follow the flow, you will find you develop these skills very quickly. And people are like, whoa.
Yeah, and unraveling the onion is kind of the point of everything, is that's what's going to get you out of your own way to be able to let the energy come through the way it needs to come through. So it's it's interesting because even, like I said, in India, you see this, and that's one thing I love about India, and I'm sure it's through most Eastern cultures, because there's a lot of faith there. There's a lot of faith in what we deem as impossible in the West. It's my teacher and my teacher's teacher. When Western students started coming over there, they were very put off by how many questions we would ask, because Westerners ask a lot of questions. But in India, you don't ask the guru questions. You just don't ask, because you need to figure that out. The guru gives you the information, and then you just take it. You just take it and you integrate it. And I loved my boyfriend's teacher. I never got a chance to meet him. He would pick and choose. His English was not that great of English, but he probably understood more than he would let on, and he would kind of pick and choose what he would actually understand and what he wouldn't, because it gave that student they had no choice but to actually go within themselves to find the answers. But and that's the beautiful thing again about the East, is that we're so logical in the West. As Westerners, we want to see the muscular system. We want to see the structure of the bones. We want to have a direct answer for everything. Where in the East, I just love the Indian head bobble. They just bobble your head, I say, I don't think my teacher knew where your kidneys were. I don't think he knew where your liver was. I don't think he knew where any of those organs were, because that didn't matter to him. He was looking at your energy. That's what's matter was the energy. It didn't matter where your spleen is located to him. What mattered was looking at the energy and seeing where the energy was held in your particular system. And that's the beautiful thing about it too, because we all have the same template as human beings. We all have the same skeleton and organs with the same template, but we're all so vastly different when it comes to where we're holding karma, where we're holding energy, what our path is like. And yeah, sometimes it is that just letting go and just going with it, because if you overthink it, I mean, that's what yoga is basically saying. Stop overthinking shit. Like, just don't,
Don't think at all.
yeah, just release it. Nirodha means nothingness. Yeah, so many people mistranslate that line. They say yoga is silencing the mind. No, it's not silencing the mind. Silencing means it's still there. It's just quiet. Nirodha means nothingness. The no thing. It's nothing. It's nothing. And that's we earlier you kind of said something about that. You're everything and nothing at the same time. Again, Ram Dass had a very famous speech where he talked about becoming nothing. And I think that too, we all have this grandiose idea of what are you going to be when you grow up? What is this? What's your future spouse going to look like? We have these like expectations of these models of how our life is supposed to look, but that's all thought and expectation. But once you reel that back and you release that and you become the no thing, then you become everything. The possibility opens when, to everything, to the fulfillment of Purusha.
Well, that comes from one of my teachers, the Jade Emperor. When you accept you know nothing, you know everything, which resorts back to the bellows effect that we perceive reality that way. Yeah. And how to enter the primordial mother is the substance, is the energy potential, and you become the master of that, the master keeper creator. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you do things that are seemingly impossible, but that's where the magic comes into it. If I had a dime for some of the craziest things that I've performed within magical rituals to create heaven on earth here, you'd be a little blown away by it. And that's not even when it comes to physical, spiritual, but, more, material expressions of, people want certain things to take place within their reality. And they come with their wish list, and it's like, I need this happen, and this happen, and this happen. And I'm like, okay, sure. And with that, this creation is for you, and it will reflect the result of this evidence. Karma in of itself is a really interesting one, because we use that within Taoist magic, because everyone's subject to the electromagnetism. So what happens is we lay down the grid and the infrastructure of perfection on top of the distortion. And it basically, like a heat-seeking missile, will find its way to whatever the prescription is within the talisman and the magic itself. And what happens is, if you are in a set belief system that this is real, you will be subject to the effects of it, which is 99% of people. So I always proposition people with a contemplation that this is a truth within a Taoist path. And one of the first things I teach any of my students is, your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions.
That's part of yoga too. Yeah.
They're like, whoa. And, in most cases, I can have that mastered skill in anybody in a couple of weeks, where they move their emotions like an icon on a screen. It's there and it's not. Yeah. And what happens is, but what if I feel this? If I'm feeling angry or sad, you transmute it. You've already experienced it, and it's gone. It's transitory. It has no value. It is what it is. The more you put value on it yourself within this human condition, it then presents itself as a said obstacle within a timeline that you repeat over and over again. Like any type of, from a physicist perspective, it'd be like a fractal pattern. You alter those instantaneously, because the real ingredients to this material is thoughts, feelings, and emotions. That's it. You can go to the past, you can go to the future, you can be present. These are the very set ingredients of the human condition. So once you acquire the ability to transmute the emotion and the feeling, which are vastly different, even though people say it's the same, once you transmute that into a high frequency, the thought is wisdom that you can reflect on, but it doesn't have the energy potential and charge within your physical body to distract you. Because this is all just distraction, this distortion. Right. That's all it does. But people get dumbfounded. It's like I've had students that are, judges and police officers and people that just want to break from being this misery of being human. And when they master the state, because I always tell people, look, if you're going to invest any amount of time into your own development, there should be set evidence. So even the first time someone may experience any training that I give them, they get to measure the value of that training within the same experience. So I give them an exercise that will show them how far they've got within the first 27 minutes of their experience of any training. They can measure their developed skill, as it should be. It shouldn't be, hey, blind faith, sit in the corner. I've had so many students that are sitting in ashrams, temples, all over the world that have been there for 5 years in silence and had nothing but back pain. Right. And all of a sudden they come across me and they're doing superhuman things that they thought were impossible, that only one guru that they had to listen to and never, ever talk to them. They give them a little zip of a word and then they disappear. That training is all over the world, and I'm not dismissing it. That's just not how I work. When the student is the teacher is the student. Yeah. The more I give, the more I receive. Furthermore, this is an incantation from my teacher, Jade Emperor. A power abundant in its giving you will receive. Unifying the body with the spirit with the energy. Bringing heaven to earth. Transcending all is one, one is all. Revealing perfection manifest. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. And there you have it. That visceral experience that we were communing with in those very words was the very evidence that I could have said, stoopy, boopy, boopy. You were feeling the resonance of that. And that's the whole point of it. It's like, when you understand the power of that, but in that incantation resides the nature of all things. It reveals itself to you. And the idea that it's unobtainable is generally controlled by a hierarchical sort of like setting where people want to have power upon you as opposed to teach you to expand to another level. Which is really the true nature of wisdom teaching, in my opinion. Oh, absolutely. You want to ascend to know thyself.
That goes back to the law of one talks about that. Like you have service to self, service to others, and that's the polarity of, do you take these teachings and hoard them for yourself, or do you share them with the world? Do you openly give them to humanity? Those are the two choices.
That is your gift. That is your offering.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that only becomes self-evident from the seeker to the knower when it comes in the form of servitude and selflessness. And you'll know it because you're not thinking. You'll be like, oh, whoa. Everyone's exhibited these abilities throughout their timeline, whether they happen once, twice, 3 times, an angel. These things come up and you can refer to them and go, I remember when I was helping this person out and I wanted nothing in return. But in most cases, within the Taoist canon, we reveal when you act in virtue, you have none whatsoever, which is the very problem of most seekers is, I'm virtue signaling. God, I've done everything. I've taken the shirt off my back. I've sold my worldly possessions. What is it for me that you cannot share? And this is the very delusion, because that, God doesn't care if you've got $1 billion in your bank account or 1 cent. This material has nothing to do with a moral compass. The universe doesn't work like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because even I was looking again, Rob Doss, he was talking about that when you put the label of being virtuous, when you put the label of I'm a do-gooder, all of a sudden it loses its value because you're putting the attachment to thought around that, where it should just be selfless action and selfless action alone. And that's, yeah.
Well, I think that it becomes problematic for most people because that's conceptual. Yeah. And so a lot of my students will be like, but Jifu, I want to learn the levitating and the telekinesis and the telepathy and all the other goodies. And I'm like, look, it's very clear. My journey has always been like this. Big Trouble in Little China meets Last Airbender, and they have a baby. I share that mystical, magical stuff. That's the journey. When you become obsessed with one level of development that makes you whole, there's a level of deficiency. That's okay. Once you hit go and you go past go and collect $200, that allure will diminish, and you'll continue to move upward, as more as upward as inward, which is the ascension of everybody. But furthermore, it won't be diluted with the need to find merit in what you're doing. And that's what I always say. It doesn't bother me. I couldn't care less if you were like giving me the validation that I'm the next coming of Moses or I'm Jesus Christ. That doesn't matter, because I'm not working in a construct where your approval determines the outcome of the information.
Right.
Because the information comes from when I observe, when I receive that, I'm no place, no person, no thing. I'm just now. It cannot come from anywhere else. I mean, I've measured my brainwaves for years over this. And I mean, there's some people, they're called, there's a guy named David Hawkins, Stephen Hawkins, with the level of consciousness or whatever. I would, if you rest in peace, my friend, we'll have a conversation in the spirit world, which I love to do. But the truth is I transmit a brainwave of 100 to 400 hertz and witness physical healings all the time. So that's high gamma. For anyone that wants to get into neurology, the gamma is basically the convergence of conscious and unconscious, and you are one. You are unified. That means that you can access any part of your unconscious that may create obstacles, including autonomy. And so the autonomic nervous system is accessible. This is how you empower yourself to access your 50 trillion cells so that you can transmute and play with energy at will. I think the biggest misconception of people is that they get caught in the separation. Yeah. So I get a lot of light workers, energy healers. I'm a mystic. I'm a healer. I'm a qigong master. I'm a nigong master. I'm a this. I'm that. And I'm like, okay, you're on my doorstep. What is it? I'll ask you one question. Like, yes, what is? How do you feel at the end of your day? And they go, I'm exhausted. Aha! Elementary, my dear Watson. I will be your Sherlock to your Watson. Let me help you out, because you have yet to realize the unification. So a lot of the young bucks get all head up in this stuff. They get in and they're full of vitality and they've got energy potential, but they don't realize they're just burning their own candle. So within Taoism, we call it the Jing. This is basically the life force, the constitution, your hereditary disposition, your DNA, what you come into this world with. And I use the analogy of a battery pack. So people come in with a battery. I've never seen anyone over 80% with the potential of 100. And so what happens is people come in and they don't realize their own potential, but they siphon from their life force, their constitution, in the idea that they're suffering from the universe or a God or whatever, and they get exhausted. Like when you channel, you get exhausted. When you heal, you get exhausted. That doesn't happen. I am at 1,000,000% and above an infinite percent all day long. I mean, this is said evidence of whether you're using your own life force or you're tapping into the primordial mother, as we would put it within Taoism, and that is abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite. So you measure that, you use the mastery of your immortal alchemy, using the Taoist alchemy to take your battery from 80 to 100%, from 100 to 1,000, from 1,000 to 9,000, and booyah, you are superhuman. You are bulletproof, as you put. I love that movie, that song, Bulletproof. Titanium. Remember? Anyway, so that to me gives me evidence that I'm never tapping into my life force. And people even my kids, they're like, my eldest is 12. It's like, where do you get the energy from, Dad? Where we are learning, young buck, you're learning to appreciate the value of vitality and the incredible substance that you have. And people just tap into it and they just get burnt out. Massage therapists, body workers, oh my goodness, they're like they're living misery. They're living pain and suffering because they embody every person that comes in. So one of the biggest, cries for help is, I'm an empath. Okay, that's cool. I'm so sensitive to everything around me. All right, that's great. You're framing everything. This is great. I mean, this is a good start. Now let's get you away from the need for the feared idea that you are not me and I am not you, because we are one. So to be afraid of me is to be afraid of you. To dismiss me is to dismiss you. And furthermore, the level of protection is then problematic because you inseed it into the very fabric of your perception, and that becomes the foundation of your belief system, which your knowing will be, oh, I'm in the room with Karen and she's vacuous. I'm in the room, or more commonly for my world as an OG, a psychic vampire.
Yeah.
These are all evidence of this, but they only have that power if you allow that within your infrastructure. But fearlessness is something that you ascend to, and you master the emotional state, which is all. It's not that hard. I always say it's infantile. A lot of people tend to go, no. It's the constant, sage's path to burn the misery out. Well, okay. Or you can just do it this way and be completely happy and blissful for the rest of eternity. That's for you to decide. Try this model. Try it out for size, use it. And if you like it, why don't you keep implementing it other than having to constantly be in the miserable state of cycling and recycling? Because it's a trap. It's an absolute trap, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. No, and it's so funny you're saying that too, because like in the traditional yoga world, we get up at 2:00 in the morning. And in India, we're at the Shala at 3:30, and I do that still to this day. I got up at 2:00 this morning. I taught this morning, and people say all the time, "Oh, I could never do that." My thing is always we get used to it, but you are I think you are learning to tap into an energy source that isn't necessarily your own. In the beginning, it sucks. Like in the beginning, when I first started doing it, I was like, I used to go to bed at this time, and now I'm getting up to actually do this crazy practice and start my day. But yeah, you start to, and I think that's the true for a lot of people in any spiritual walk of life. They typically look younger than they are. They look a lot younger than they are, because you're tapping into a different type of energy source that is available to everyone, but it's also kind of masked by our own limitations sometimes, and but through thought, and it's a fascinating thing to study. It's a fascinating thing to observe, because I know, again, like the whole Ram Dass thing, I know certain scientists are probably very puzzled by all this because it should be impossible, but yet we do it anyway. Yeah, we do it. So if it's impossible, but we do it. People in India and in the East have been doing this, the whole story of like Yahshua walking on water. Well, that's a form of levitation. That's a form of controlled energy. Like that's what that is. The healing that's the Reiki, that's what's still being done to this day, and even in the book of John, he says, you will do these things and you will do them better than I, so we will continue to learn these and study these and evolve these ancient techniques that really are kind of the heart of who and what we truly are. I always tell my students, you didn't come here to just eat junk food and watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Like, that's not why you came here.
Is that a thing? I don't know.
Planet Earth is not a vacation planet. Like, you came here to work, and that's the beautiful thing of that work, that dharma of rediscovering yourself, of shattering your own self illusions and delusions, and so. But I have another show in a few minutes, so but this has been
timing. Perfect timing.
This has been so fun. This has been so fascinating too. I've been to one Taoist ceremony many years ago before I ever went to India. I also did shrooms. Well, I still do shrooms sometimes, but I had some of these experiences on psychedelics before I actually went to India without psychedelics. So that's a conversation for another day.
I always offer people a psychonautic realization within their own alchemical process without any external that can last for days on end. You know, I had one of my friends in one of the altars here, and she's like, "Holy!" I mean, she's a medical intuitive, and she's like, "Holy shit, I can't even. This is like crazy. The energy in here is like pulling me in all directions, and I am like vibrating at a crazy level." Because that's when I'll take people up, certain ones that are approved by the three pure ones, up to a specific altar, and that's where I do all my magic. So whenever I imprint things, like if I'm imprinting a portal for someone to bring the Taoist frequency into their reality, it permeates like literally blocks away from their own home.
Yeah.
Everything changes. And, you know, it's just all to do with magic. It's all wonderful and exciting. And I want to thank you. I'm going to put your social sphere and interweb under this podcast. I want my disciples, students, 126s, and subscribers to come out and see what the offerings of Brice are, and to look deeply into them and explore them to their heart's content. And furthermore, I imagine you're available for teaching, one-on-ones, yoga, internet experiences. Share more with the audience before we leave.
Actually, I do teach locally here in Atlanta, but by the time this releases, I think I think I can say it now. I'm in the process of developing kind of like an online mystery school with another person, and we're going to have that available. I'm sure once this is aired, it's going to be called the Esoterica Academy. And we're going to have all sorts of different courses on there, different exercises you can do. It's all, you know, it's, you know, as I say, all I can do is give you the information. You got it. You're the one that's got to drink from the well, the water, just to give back, give everything that I've been taught over my 19 years in this world, pay it forward on a grander, wider world scale, so that we can get Earth back on track.
I love it. I love it, my dear friend. So, furthermore, the last question: what's your definition of spiritual consciousness?
Oh God, that's a hard one. I think just being you, just being in your real you, you're spiritually conscious of the fact that you are having this incredible experience. You know, the Yoga Sutras, especially Swami Satchitananda in his commentary talks about the more you realize, the more you recognize your own soul. The more you recognize the soul in other people as well, but the more you're able to enjoy this experience of being human even more, because you know what it's about. And that, I think, is spiritual consciousness, because you're not attached, like you're saying with the emotion. When you understand that your emotions aren't you, your thoughts aren't you, there's something entirely different, you're able to kind of move them along, then you can enjoy them. You can enjoy hugging your kids even more and having Christmas morning, because you're here for the experience, because it doesn't define you as a soul. And I think that's that spiritual consciousness of just knowing that, having that knowing that you are not just confined to what you think you are.
Amen to that, sister. Amen. I'm very grateful for you. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
This is so fun.
I feel really happy to be reunited, and it feels so good. We're bonding our friendship once again in many lifetimes. So I'm grateful to have you in my life. I want to thank you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.